You got a little taste of South America yesterday with Brian Forrester's lecture when he was describing the skulls and some of the sites that these skulls came from. Now, I was obviously with Brian last November in Peru. We did our annual Megalithomania tour there. And I'm going to show you some slides around Peru, but because Brian's going to do his talk on Monday night, he's going to go into it in more detail. But I stayed on in Peru, in South America, for an extra few weeks, and I visited some other more obscure sites there, a place called Chavin de Junta, and I also flew down to Colombia as well. I went to San Agustin and Bogota, and so the main bulk of this talk is going to be exploring the sites there because they're not really as well known, but they're equally as fascinating and all rather megalithic as well. And you'll see connections pop up in these places relating to Easter Island and even Europe, which surprised me somewhat when I arrived there. So this is the kind of area, the top arrow here, this is kind of roughly the area, and all these different, Ecuador, Colombia, Peru. And this red line we're going to get more into as we go along. This is what I believe is the path of a particular earth energy current that goes all the way around the world called the plumed serpent, which links up and connects with the rainbow serpent energy current in Lake Titicaca in Peru. And we'll have a look at these because a lot of you might be realize that they're actually, the rainbow serpent is potentially the extension of the Michael and Mary lines all around the planet. But I just want to give you some examples of some of the stonework, some of the sites in Peru and Bolivia. This is the Temple of Fertility. This is just around the edge of Lake Titicaca near a town called Puno. And this is quite a small temple site, but it's got a very powerful, 2 or 3 energy currents going through it. But you can immediately see the stonework. It's like of a polygonal nature, and it's beautifully cut and pieced together. And this is something you get all over, different parts of South America, and around different parts of the world. And I've got a few examples of the global connections here. This is what's inside the temple. This is why they call it a fertility temple. However, Jonathan and I and several others went there, trying to deal with the altitude. And to be honest with you, they look more like mushrooms than they do anything phallic when you get up close. And so these look remarkably like psilocybin mushrooms, or what we call magic mushrooms in England. And you do get these in this part of the world and in Mexico. And so this kind of intrigued me because this, they always call it a fertility temple, but I believe it may have been a mushroom temple. When you actually look at these here, and you can see some of the stonework in the background and how it's all sort of put together in this sort of almost like a childlike fashion, this polygonal fashion. Here's our filmmaker Jonathan balancing on one leg at a place called Silistani. And you can again see the sheer size of some of these stones here and the way they're put together. Silistani is more famous for its kind of round towers. I don't have any photos in this particular slideshow, but I'm sure Brian will be showing some tomorrow night. And the whole site there, again, is right around the edge of Lake Titicaca, which is one of the highest lakes in the world, and possibly one of the largest. It's almost like a sea when you're kind of looking over it. You can't see any land on the other side of it. It's that large. And I'm just going to give you a few more examples around this part of the world. We're jumping over to Tiwanaku and Pumapunku here. Now these are the more famous sites. There was even a whole TV program about it made by Ancient Aliens that covered just Pumapunku. It's I think it's that important. There's 2 sites there. There's Tiwanaku, which is the famous site with the Akapana pyramid. But Pumapunku has these huge blocks here. I don't know if you can really see what size these are, but some of them, weigh well over 100, possibly 200 tons. There's been estimates of 400 tons, but I think that might be a bit exaggerated. But it's completely crumbled. It's almost like it's been deliberately destroyed, whoever built it. But there's been a lot going on at Tiwanaku and Pumapunku because, number one, it's in the middle of nowhere. There's no reason why it would be there. But what's most important is that it became a thriving metropolis, and there's evidence of this. And they had really high success of growing food, even in the barren sort of area that it is. And the reason they were able to do that is because it's now thought now actually being scientifically tested by the BLT research team, John Burke and others, that they used, they compressed and pushed water through different sort of sluice gates throughout the whole area. It's also on a fault line. There's a fault line that goes very close to it, and there's two different types of geology meet underneath Tiwanaku and Pumapunku, very close to it. And it used to be right next to the lake Titicaca, but now obviously it's several miles away because they think the land mass has shifted around even since it was built. And the dating of it's quite interesting as well, because Arthur Poznański, who studied Tiwanaku and Pumapunku for about 40 or 50 years, believes he dated it back through archaeoastronomy all the way back to about 17,000 years ago. So that would put the dating back very, very earlier than even, Göbekli Tepe and other sites like that. But what interested me about this site, I'm not going to show you a picture of every single stone there. I just want to show you a couple of examples. But look, this is a kind of spiral. I mean, I kept finding these in different parts of South America and in, obviously, different parts of the world. But you can see this perfect spiral. And they're these kind of, I personally think this is a symbol of earth energies, a sort of sign of the serpent people when they were building these sites and working and harnessing these particular energies. And if you go into the Tiwanaku Museum, you're not allowed into this bit anymore for some reason. But I managed to get to have a look at it. I couldn't get my camera in there, but there's a beautifully carved large block of stone with a double spiral, just like the ones you get in Cornwall and in Newgrange Island and Malta and other places in Tiwanaku. And you get it in New Zealand as well. And so there seems to be these global symbols that keep popping up everywhere. And here's another one. This is actually like a serpent, which is kind of carved into the stone here and some other bits here. So whether these were later additions or whether these were like the signatures of the builders, we don't really know. But we'll come back to this because the serpent god of this part of the world was called Viracocha, which means plumed serpent or feathered serpent. And he seems to be popped back into almost every site and every legend of this part of the world, as a very similar god does in Mexico and Guatemala, called Quetzalcoatl or Cucutlan. More examples of the stonework. This is in the Coricancha. This is in Cuzco. What interests me is that this clamp, this sort of space for a metal clamp, you find in lots of different places, all over South America, obviously. You get it in Mexico, you get it in Egypt, you even get it in Rome and other places, Angkor Wat in Cambodia, and pretty much all over the world. And again, these are like extremely hard kind of rock to be carving this kind of thing. And obviously they must have had some kind of smelting device to kind of pour the molten metal in. And it's thought that these were just to hold the stones together. But if they use certain types of metal, i.e. copper, they become conductive and they actually kind of allow energies to move through the stones much more effectively. And this is something that again was tested by John Burke. And these are all around in Tiwanaku and Pumapunku, where it's believed now that they were working with these energies, whether they were using it for electricity or consciousness altering or fertility to enhance the seeds. They're probably all possibilities, and there were probably all those reasons why they were using it. This is just a aerial view. I had to jump very high to get this photo. But you can see these like nodules here kind of on top, and very unusual, perfectly cut stone, absolutely precision. And these are all at the lower levels you get in Cuzco and all over South America. And I was absolutely fascinated. Being a megalithomaniac, you get fascinated by any stone that's bigger than a few of you could carry. So it's going to keep me busy, I think, for the next few lifetimes. But you can just see that, again, the precision here. This is what kind of gets me. All over, you get this high precision in Peru. This is something that Brian mentioned yesterday. He's going to talk about tomorrow night. The lower levels are the larger stones, and they're the more sophisticated designs. The newer levels, the higher levels, are the less sophisticated and the smaller stones. And you get you get this building up, but it's always the lowest and the oldest seem to be where the megalithic masters or the serpent people were. Just jumping back to Silistani here, you can see these similarities. This kind of grabbed me when I saw this. This is one of the carvings at Silistani. This is we're going back around Lake Titicaca, and this is Göbekli Tepe in Turkey, and you can see the same kind of construction, the precision cuts. Göbekli Tepe, as we know, as people like Andrew Collins and Robert Schoch and Klaus Schmidt and others, they've dated it back to 8 to 10 or 11,000 BC. So we're looking at the Atlantean era, if you would like to call it that. So if, we've got the same kind of stonework in Göbekli Tepe, you've got the same kind of relief carvings here, yeah? So why aren't the Peruvian sites and the Bolivian sites have the same dates? Interestingly, there has been some interesting data. They've found that some of the fields and the level where they grow on all the different levels in Peru and Bolivia, they've managed to date some of that back to 10,000 years. So this era, as people like Graham Hancock popularised a decade ago or more, is actually now being realised archaeologically around the world, in Peru, obviously in the Sumerian Middle East region, and in Göbekli Tepe, which is very close to that. So there's a lot of evidence now pushing the dates back, and a paradigm seems to be shifting regarding that, as I mentioned in the introduction yesterday. Again, some beautiful stonework. This is just in the Cuzco streets. You can just, this is still there. It's precision. It's such hard stone. It doesn't really wear away very easily, even though it does rain quite a bit there. But again, you can just see this here. It's almost like they've sort of softened it somehow, shaped it. It seems like giant children were doing it or something, because somehow they just put these stones, really high walls, going up 20 or 30 feet like a Sacsayhuaman and other places. Some of them are smaller like this, but you've had architects and builders and stonemasons look at this, and they're just as baffled as the layman how they could have done this so accurately. And you get this again. This is a global phenomenon. The global connections here just extremely noticeable. This is Angkor Wat, and you get a similar kind of precision at some of the sites in that part of the world, and you get the metal clamps there as well, which is interesting. Anybody got any idea where this is? Yep. This is one of the 3 pyramids in Giza. And this is a granite casing of the pyramids. And again, you get the same kind of, this isn't so polygonal, but it's still, there's irregular shapes. You can see this angle here. You can see the puffy bits here, as though the stones are being shaped. And then you even get what you get here, even though there's sand here. It continues across the floor. There's a whole floor area around the pyramid of solid granite, and curved stones going into this whole floor area. This is, you go to Peru, you go to different places. Right? In Italy, you get this as well, north and south of Rome. You keep finding this kind of design, this kind of polygonal, this kind of irregular shaped mega blocks that have been beautifully carved, and it just is a signature of some brilliant architects from antiquity. This is the Osaka Castle in Japan. I just took these off the net. I haven't been there yet, but you can just see. Look at the size of some of these. These are huge, and this is all around the whole area. The next one here is the largest one. This is one stone, about 15 feet high. It's called the Octopus Stone, and it's granite, like the casing on that on that pyramid is. So again, we're looking at in a region of 130 tons, maybe. And supposedly it was built around 400 years ago, which is quite impressive, because the technology seems to be in most other places thousands of years ago. Just another quick look at that one, just to see again the magnitude of some of these stones. How would you get that one there, for instance? Was she going to just pass it up to a friend? Climb up a ladder, How would you get that one there? Fascinating. This is Osaka in Japan. Yeah. A friend of ours who came on the Peru tour gave us some photos of it, because she'd been there recently and was very surprised how similar it was to Peru. You know, you really don't really notice it until you really kind of get up close. I mean, I haven't been to this one yet, but I've been to quite a few other sites, and you really don't notice until you actually get up close and you see the similarity in design. And I think it's also, when you're there, you see the magnitude and how difficult it would be to construct, so you kind of get blown away by that, and then you start really noticing the comparisons. But let's jump over to the Island of the Sun in Lake Titicaca. This is interesting. This is like a dolmen, almost, like a table, which is actually on the north end of the Island of the Sun. And you see I've written the path of the Michael Earth Energy Current. We'll come back to that shortly, because there's evidence. I mean, if my dowsing skills are up to scratch, I found, when I went there in 2007, I found this great sort of male or masculine energy current going right through the top part of the island. It went through this, and it went through this behind it. Now, classically, this is a kind of temple of what they call, I think it's the Puma, but to me it looks like a big frog. I don't know if you can kind of see it there. Some people say there's a dragon's head here as well, sleeping dragon and the head there. I think there's like a frog looking at us there with the sort of legs here. But under there is an altar, and this is where this energy line goes through here, right through the middle. And I kind of recognised the energy of it when I was there. I thought, this is really similar to the Michael energy line in England, and I thought, that can't be. I knew Robert Kuhn's work and of how he believed that they go around the whole world, the Michael and Mary energy lines, and he said they go through Lake Titicaca. So I kept it in my mind, and I spent a whole day on the island trying to explore that. And this is kind of what I found when I was there. This top one here is more masculine. This is where this site is here. Down here you get this sort of some Inca steps and other things at the southern part of the island. And you have this one going all the way through. Sean, who introduced me, helped me with this map. And if you extend the Michael line all the way around the world, quite accurately, it does actually go right through the middle of the island. The straight line alignment, really, as you know, the lay, as John Michel and others would call it. And then you have these weaving energy currents, which kind of sort of veer out from it and come back in and meet, like they do in England, like they do in other parts of the world. So yeah, it kind of has all the properties of a classic lay with earth energies weaving around it. And this is the other alignment that appears to go around the planet. We'll have a look at a global map of that shortly, but I just want to show you some other stuff which is on the island. Or let me just jump back here a sec, because this is like red sandstone, a lot of this. You can sort of see the red, and it's highly magnetic. You've also got, through the top part of the island, just the other side of this, going down the cliffs, you've got like another fault going through it, and that almost follows the same path as the Plume Serpent current across the length of the island. Sort of up this kind of area here, sort of goes like that. So you have energy there. It's like it's happening, you know what I mean? And so, and this has been recognised by the ancients because they make offerings there. There's a whole fertility. They think it's a fertility site, amongst other things. There's also this stone here. Isn't from this island. It's a different type of rock. This has been tested and proven. So they brought this over especially as like an altar rock. This has been cut and shaped like the other stones in that area. And there used to be a whole temple site up on the north part of the island, which has been pretty much destroyed. But this is, I found this, which is still there. Just evidence of sort of megalithic construction. And it's actually the name of the actual site right where this is, where all the energy kind of is. And it's called the place where people lose themselves. That is actually the name given that goes back in hundreds of years into legend. And there's lots of chambers and rooms there, which aren't really, comfortable for living in or anything or staying in. So it seems like it's more like a site where people will come over from the mainland. And there's legends that women would come over at certain times of year and actually do ceremony and get blessings from the gods and go back again. Also, you must remember, around Lake Titicaca, this is where the legend of Viracocha, he emerged from the lake. This is one of the legends. And he was the Plume Serpent, remember? And so maybe he was either, visionary representation of these brilliant and amazing energies there. This is the southern part of the island. You can see the island of the moon in the background. This is where I think the Mary energy line goes. I'd like to get Sean or Sig or someone over there and do some proper dowsing and see what we can find, because it was just me on my lonesome doing it a few years ago. But again, so we have the Viracocha legend, who, when you look at the stories and the legends, he doesn't seem like a legend. He seems like it's real. He emerged from the lake on a raft of serpents. He brought arts and technology and farming and peace to all the peoples of this area. He was pale-skinned. He had a beard. He wore robes. He had lots of powers. And when you trace where some of these earth energies go that Robert Kuhn and others talk about, this is where it said he went and he moved across the landscape. So this absolutely fascinates me. And you get these two staffs here, him carrying these staffs. You get that obviously in England. You get that from other countries around the world. So what does that mean? Where does that come from? More about Viracocha. This is a representation of him, which I think Brian may have mentioned yesterday, like his face in the rocks when viewed from a site called Ollantay Tambo, which is in the Sacred Valley on the way between Cuzco and Machu Picchu. Again, you can see this is one of the pictorial representations, like a serpent head. It's said it's almost like the boat he arrived on had scales on it, like a serpent skin, and it moved across the water, making no noise. And his name, was Foam of the Sea. That was like the name that people remember of him. And what absolutely blew me away is initially, actually, when I read some of Graham Hancock's work, but I did a bit more research on this, you get exactly the same legend and exactly the same story, almost word for word, in Mexico, along the Gulf Coast where he appeared. Again, but he's slightly different terminology. He's called Quetzalcoatl, which again means the plumed serpent, god of the wind, Venus, the dawn, and many other things. And he's linked with all the early Olmec sites in Mexico, which I talked about a couple of years ago. So you do get these similarities pop up, and these serpent legends are, again, really a global phenomenon. You get it all different parts of the world. Oopsie-daisy. Okay, sorry about that. Okay. And these are just some other, this is from Tula in Mexico. This is actually from Tiwanaku. I think that's from Tiwanaku as well, in one of the temples there. So this next slide just shows you the global energies where they potentially go. This is a Robert Kuhn map. He was a Glastonbury resident many years ago. I never met him or knew him or anything personally. But this is like the part in Britain. We all know about the Michael and Mary lines. This is the extension. It kind of goes through the Azores, I think. And then this is the Lake Titicaca area, which we're focusing on. This line here, which I'm interested in today, this alignment, I'm very intrigued by that because it appears to go through many of the other sites. I was kind of following it, really, when I was trying to sort of follow the potential of it through South America, sort of just this area here. That took a couple of months, mainly in Chavin de Junta and in San Agustin in Colombia. But you can see where else it goes around the world. And he was a visionary. He wasn't out there searching for it. So I've kind of, there's a guy called Tor Webster who does that now. And I like to get out to these sites and see if I can find any evidence of these. Here's another representation of it. So again, we're looking at this kind of area here. I mean, that's a bit too low, really. It should be about there. But it just gives you some idea. So just jumping back here, this is the area we're kind of looking at. We'll get more into detail with that shortly. But I mean, I'm sort of intrigued by the whole Ouroboros idea, where these are like great circles of energy that go around the planet, the serpent eating its tail. Here's just some ideas that Sean sort of borrowed from Sean's presentation. I did ask him, but he wasn't there when I did ask him. So. And this is just, I'm not going to go right into this now, I don't really have time, but I just wanted to show you this because it just shows you where because these rainbow serpents are like two hoops, like two energy hoops that kind of join back up, and no one knows where the start and the beginning is, which is the same, really, as the legend, the stories of the Aurora Boreae. This is Robert Kuhn's idea. This is odd because when you look at the work of, from classic Earth energies, research, you look at the work of Hamish Miller and Paul Broadhurst, for instance, they say that there's one straight line alignment that John Michell kind of discovered, and then there's two energy currents which aren't more than 10 to 30 feet wide, or variations on it, and they kind of weave around each other. Whereas Robert Kuhn, he believes that there's a beam of energy all the way around the planet, which is 40 kilometers wide. So you're going to get a lot of sites on that, aren't you? You're going to get a lot of sites. You're going to get like a 1/20th of the country in it. And so he believes that's the same principle all the way around the world. So obviously you're going to get the whole of the whole of the island of the sun on Lake Titicaca will be taken up if you have it that wide. And so there's no precision trying to work out where the lines go from the way he looks at it. So, I mean, I'm open to suggestion. I like this idea. It's more all-encompassing. But I think there's a lot more detail when you get out on the landscape and you find these energy currents, you find these telluric currents, and you try and trace them. There's a lot more intricacies about where they are. I think... where's the next one? I think my map kind of moved when my computer crashed last night, so these arrows are slightly in the wrong place, I think. So I won't actually use that map. But Chavin is in central Peru, which is kind of around this area here. And I believe these lines go through there, this plumed serpent energy line does. But let's get into looking at some of the sites here. Now, Chavin is an absolutely beautiful place. It's really hard to get to. You've got to be quite sturdy, really, to get to Chavin. You get to Lima. You do a 10-hour bus ride north of Lima, sort of northwest, and then you have to find the other bus station, which is about half a mile away. No one knows where it is or anything. And then you get on that bus, which is designed for children, I think, and doesn't have any suspension. And then you go through some mountains, which, as the crow flies, is only about 30 miles away, but it takes you 3 hours to get there because you're literally going through over 2 or 3 mountains on dirt tracks. And it's pretty... I wouldn't take a group of people there unless, they had insurance. But it's when you get there, it's great. It's worth it. It's a really nice little village. You just stay in one of the hotels there. It's about £5 a night, and then you don't want to go leave because it's so dangerous going back again. But and it's a beautiful place, of course. So this is just some of the stuff here. This is one of the main. This is in the main temple site. It's very Mayan looking, really, Mayan and Olmec looking, Chavin. It's in the middle of nowhere again, like almost like Tiwanaku is. It's really in the middle of nowhere. It's amazing how anything kind of grew there and developed there. But it's just, and it's got this whole underground complex there. This is just one of the photos from the whole megalithic underground complex. It goes to several levels. It's like a labyrinth of going on here. And it doesn't look like it was for storage. People weren't living in there. This was like either a ceremonial place or it was like a technology. It was like an energy technology, I think, one of the aspects of this. It's got megalithic elements, these blocks here, these columns. It's got beautiful carving. You can't really see them, but beautiful carvings all over these, which are pretty much worn away now. They estimate, officially, it's not that old. It's just like 1,500 years old. But you look there, and you cannot believe that. It's just there's loads of lichen all over it. It's been completely grown over. There's been like cataclysms happened there. It could be why the underground temples were there. But there's been some research done here by John Burke, which we'll have a look at shortly. But first of all, I just want to do a few comparisons here like I did earlier. You see this style of here. You get the same kind of thing happening. Okay, slides aren't changing. you get the same kind of things. This is a place called Mitla and Monte Alban. This is near Oaxaca in Mexico. And you get virtually the same kind of design. You get the megalithic columns, which archaeologists say don't exist in Mexico, but there they are. This is out in the car park of Monte Alban. It's not, this is how they sort of treat some of the sites there. And it's the same kind of design. It's virtually the same design as Chavin. And you keep finding so many comparisons. This is more Mitla here with the columns and the lintels in Mexico. Again, this is Mitla. And then inside the underground chamber in Chavin is you get this. This is actually inside the underground chamber. It's like this very weird kind of monolith. This is another one, which is, I think they've rebuilt it with all the designs, and it's got this beautiful psychedelic shamanic design throughout, carved all around it. And it's now thought that they were entirely into San Pedro cactus, amongst other things. And they were very much like the Olmecs were, who were into the psilocybin mushrooms and the Bufo marinus toad DMT. They were very shamanic culture, and this is possibly why they lived far away from the masses. But what they did develop was an incredible system of agriculture, like the Inca did, or the pre-Incan societies did around Lake Titicaca and Cusco and other places, even though the landscape wasn't particularly designed for that. But I do recommend, if you do go there, you should stay there for a day or two, and it is worth it. It's really worth going. They've got a beautiful museum on the other side of town. I can guide anyone there if they want to get there. But it's in kind of northern central Peru. It's 10,300 feet above sea level, the whole area is. The mountains there have a real energy about them. The locals say the spirits are in the mountains, and that's where the kind of energy, and you can kind of feel that energy there. It's pretty intense, and there's a whole river system running through there, the Mosna River. Excuse me a second, my slideshow's going funny. And you can see here, like the courtyard system here. It's a bit like the classic kind of ball courts you get in Mexico, these beautiful mountains in the background. And you get these megalithic blocks just popping out of the ground, sort of structures that were there before. This is the famous stele there, which shows you all these different levels, and it looks like he's having some kind of psychedelic extravaganza, this guy here. It's all been worn down. You can actually see this in the Lima Museum, a sort of reconstruction of this to see exactly what it looks like. But the stonework there is remarkable again. You get a lot of these kind of blocks which made up the inner walls of a circular temple there, which fascinated me. And the work John Burke did here is equally fascinating, where he actually believed that there's a whole load of underground sort of tight channels that lead to the stream and the river and go throughout, and they were looks like they were pushing water around all underground around the whole site, to almost like he believes they were doing it to create electric charge, which would then enhance the seed quality, and it could even create altered states of consciousness where they were altering the energies. And again, there's a lot of magnetic rock all around the whole area. It's a very magnetized area. And I was quite fascinated. I went to Huaraz, is the town you arrive at before you then go on the 10-hour trip from Lima. Then you take the 3-hour bus to Chavin. And even in Huaraz, there's an amazing museum there. So you want to have a look at that. And I did find a skull in there, but I think my computer, when it crashed, I lost that picture. Here's some other skulls anyway. These were probably in Brian's talk yesterday. This is the one from Nazca, but there's one similar to this in Huaraz. And this one here is actually in Mexico. I photographed this in Jalapa Museum along the northern part of the Gulf Coast of Mexico. I was there in 2010. But you get this all through this central and northern part of Peru, as well as what Brian described in Paracas, and even in Cusco. You get it all through the whole of Peru, going right up to the central and northern areas. So there's a lot there. There's a lot of sites. with this kind of elongated skull connection. The Casma Valley, this is northwest coast of Peru, really. There's a place called Sechin. This is an interesting site. I went here when I was there in 2007, but you get these, I'm just giving you just a few other examples and comparisons here. You get these very strange megalithic carvings with what looks like weapons. They look pretty intense, don't they? Look at this guy with hair, and there's a lot of kind of blood and guts kind of stuff going on there, which is quite shocking. But again, you find the comparisons. You can't help but notice them, because again, this is in Peru, and then this is in Mexico, which is virtually the same designs in Monte Alban again. And this keeps popping up again, Monte Alban. So let's so with this whole Chavin area, although it's off the beaten track, it's tough to get to. It's not really a tour group thing, but it's one of those sites. If you're really hardcore megalithomaniac, you'll get yourself there, and it's kind of worth it. It's definitely worth the effort. So let's take a look down in the Colombian region, which is so even though the arrows have moved slightly, these arrows are more accurate. This area, this is Colombia, so this is the area I kind of did my main bit of research here a few months ago. You fly into Bogota generally. It's difficult to come up through Ecuador, but you probably could. There probably is a way through Quito, which is another the Inca capital initially. But you fly into Bogota, and you have to go to the Gold Museum in Bogota. You can't not go there. It's too good. It's pretty much the best gold museum in the world, I would say. It has some incredible artifacts there, hundreds of them. And it seems like the whole of Peru was like a gold mining country. Like the entire country kind of had this. Even though there's not that many megalithic sites, there's only a few. There's like this whole San Agustin complex here. There's some other sites in the northern part. There's nothing else. There's not many sites there, but there's tons and tons of beautifully carved gold artifacts are found there. This is also where they found the famous little gold aeroplanes, really small ones. Where's the lapel things? And these were found in central Colombia. There's some sort of gold-looking helmets which look like the Olmec from Mexico, and a lot of it's obviously been not in the museum. It's being kept by whoever finds it. But the whole country seemed to be one of the gold capitals of the world back in prehistoric times. So this is the first thing you see when you arrive at San Agustin. Again, if you want to go to San Agustin, you go to Bogota, you do the Gold Museum, and then you get out of Bogota as quickly as possible. It's a great town, but it's pretty intense, and you can sense a bit of danger there. So I wouldn't recommend it highly, but it's like after being in Peru and Bolivia, which is beautiful, you kind of But San Agustin is beautiful. It's an amazing area. It's like a village, really, like a town village kind of thing. Again, it's about an 8-hour bus ride. On a overnight bus is the best option, and they put the air conditioning on, and it's freezing. I was prepared. I got warned about it, and it's true. It's freezing. They put it on freezing for some reason. I guess it's better than being really hot. But these are the first thing you see when you get there. You see these sort of megalithic sort of remains of some stelae there. And then you go into the site museum. Here's just some of the sort of anomalies. This stone coffer is interesting, because you get exactly the same type of design and coffers and coffins or whatever in Olmec land up on the Gulf Coast of Mexico. As you go into the main site, you see this stone. This is like what I believe is some kind of entrance stone, and it's got two serpents on it, wrapping around each other. Head there. I think the head goes around there as well. And so this kind of intrigued me, because I thought, well, maybe that's another sign of the earth energies here. Maybe the plume serpent goes here as well. I wasn't really sure. I was just guessing, but you take your dowsing rods and your compass, and you work out orientation and do a bit of dowsing. And once I got into the site, you found that, and some other interesting global connections here in the museum. On the right-hand side here, is what looks a bit like an Easter Island head, which intrigued me somewhat because back in the 1920s, there was a book called by I've forgotten his name, Harold T. Wilkins, who wrote about the ancient South America, and he described the stone. He went to San Augustine. He described the stones there and some of the carvings as though it looks like they've come from Easter Island, and this must have been the one he was talking about. That's the only one I found there that looked anything like. Well, it had the same headgear at least as the Easter Island, as you can see on the left. And he also describes a mission by the British Museum, I think this must have been 1901 or 1905, around that kind of time, where they took a load of the more exquisite Atlantean statues, because there's some quite large ones there. This is just a small one. And actually took them on a boat along, the Amazon to try and get it back to England. And they had artifacts and some old script and other things, and it sank and it disappeared. This is just a story that Harold T. Wilkins put together in one of his 2 amazing books about South America, which I highly recommend. This is just some of the early photographs of the first excavations, just to show you some of the amazing sort of statues that were discovered there. And most of these looking ones, as you'll see in the next few images, are really, they're like almost like the later culture there. You notice this really quite quickly. You can just see this with your own eyes. You don't need an archaeologist to tell you this. You can see it's the later culture. But again, this could still be very old. This could be before BC kind of time, at least a couple of thousand years old. Although again, they traditionally date it to just 500 to 1500 AD, which I think is slightly inaccurate because they found some carbon dating there around that era. This is just another old photograph here. This just shows you one of the tops of because as you'll see, there's a bunch of dolmens here. And these are some of the megaliths and the faces here from one of the early photographs. This is one of the dolmens. What's interesting about this is one of the later culture sites. I think there was a much earlier culture there when you start looking at the other pictures. But you can see here what they've done is they've kind of taken these roof slabs of the dolmens and put their own stones underneath them and reconstructed it. Because look, these are the ones you get at San Augustine in Colombia. And to me, that looks like something you're going to find in England, in Brittany, Germany, Holland, other places. And this, when you go there, you notice this is always between 10 and 15 or 20 feet lower than these ones, as though they were either they were much, much older, or they would dig massive holes and bury them there. But I think they were an earlier culture. And then I searched around the site, and I was doing a ton of research trying to find any evidence of anything earlier than 500,000 AD. And actually on the site itself, when you go up to this area here, which is the highest and oldest part of the site, they talk about a date of 3,300 BC, which relates back to the megalithic era, obviously, the first pharaonic era, the beginning of the Mayan Olmec calendar. And then it kind of all clicked into place that, yes, this is, not only is this potentially from that era, it's actually, when you look on the maps and when you trace the path of the plume serpent, it goes right through San Augustine. You've got to understand there's a lot more at San Augustine than just this one particular site. This is the Park Archaeologica site. This is the famous, tourist site, really, even though you don't get many tourists there. But there's 250 square miles of sites to visit. And we got out to as many as we could. I had like 4 to 5 days there. I stayed with my friend Inti. He actually lives there. He's moved up into the hills above San Augustine in a community. It really is one of the most beautiful, countryside scenery you can find. It's absolutely stunning. There's been a lot of, recent history there. It's been dangerous to go there up until about 4 or 5 years ago, because you have the guerrillas, and then you have the paramilitary who are trying to kill all the guerrillas, and there's been people kidnapped and thousands of people go missing and all this kind of stuff. But that's kind of slowed down a lot recently. It's not really a problem for tourists anymore. It's not really a problem at all. I didn't have any problems there. It felt great. I really enjoyed it once I got to San Agustin. But this just shows you, this is just another example. And you see how high up you are to take the photo, how deep in the ground this is. And there's a lot of underground water channels made with stone around the whole area, which, I believe, and this is the sort of thing John Burke would say, that they were sort of forcing water through small areas to kind of create charge, energy there. And this makes a lot of sense to me now. I'm kind of coming around to this idea, which a lot of the dowsers and geomancers have been saying about the underground water and the effect of it. I think that they were harnessing this. Plus, obviously, if you've got the plume serpent energy weaving through this site. And again, there were two currents. This plume serpent current seemed to divide into two and had different qualities, a bit like the Michael and Mary lines, I guess. So yeah, there's a lot of other. This is bizarre, big head, and some. Hello. But this is just again buried in the ground, like a big plectrum, and these are the sort of. This is where the sort of more modern dolmen is here, and you can see like this megaliths just holding up this kind of mound. But behind this area here is what you saw just a minute ago, which is that. It right buried in the ground. This is like 10, 15 or more feet lower in the ground. So I really do get a sense of antiquity there when you look at it. And it's a different type of stone as well. This is like a more limestone, whereas the other stuff's more kind of basalt quality. And in this area as well, there's a lot of serpent symbolism. On the right here, this is a photo that my friend John Harrison took on the Peru tour. Shows you two serpents coming in. This was actually taken in Cusco. Here's one's from Mexico. And you find this all over San Agustin, as we saw in that stone a little while ago. Here's just some of the other incredible stonework there. You get a lot of these fangs. I don't know if people had fangs back then. And you get these kind of goggles as well. Looks like he's wearing spectacles. And you get that in the Olmec world. You get a lot of this in southern Guatemala, where it looks like they're wearing spectacles or sunglasses. And then you get what potentially is either a really cool hat or it's an elongated skull. I'm not sure which. But this is just an example of some of the carvings there, and there's been a whole analysis was done on this by in a book called Dolmens of the Dead. Here's just one of the images from that, which gives you the sort of layout and construction of how some of these are. But there's like, again, there's 250 square miles worth of sites there, so you can really spend quite a bit of time exploring, and there's a lot to see there. And this kind of intrigued me as well. You look at this, and this is like a place called Petroli, which is, again, I didn't manage to get to that region, but Inti, who lives there, gave me this photograph. It's a perfect, spiral. Again, we're seeing these signs all over the place of all these different, this sort of symbolism of these energies. But I just think, this is just the tip of the iceberg. I think that there's some sites up in northern Colombia which are absolutely fascinating as well, but they take about 4 days of hiking to get there. I just didn't have time. It would have taken up all my time in Colombia. But I do recommend, if you do go to Colombia, you want to just get to San Agustin, and you can spend probably a week or two there, just if you want to see everything. I didn't have that much time, but I do plan to go back there, possibly later this year, but more likely in 2 years' time, to explore more. Again, this just shows you where these energies go again. So we were kind of here. This is Lake Titicaca area, and then you got kind of Chavin there, and then just a bit further up, you've got the sites of San Agustin, and then it goes up through here. Now this is where I want to check out next, really, because it looks like that, like you get with the Michael and Mary lines, if you're into earth energies, they do weave in and out of each other, and they stretch for miles apart and then come back again. And I get a sense that, although this is just a general representation that was developed and drawn by Robert Kuhn, that maybe it stays more inland here and comes up the side of the country and goes through this whole area here, which is where you get Costa Rica, where you get all the megalithic spheres, and you get in Nicaragua, on the island in the middle of the lake there, you get the Atlantean statues. And then you go into Honduras, where you get Capan, and there's been, on the islands off Honduras, they found megalithic construction there. And then you go up into Guatemala, in southern Guatemala, you have all these very similar looking sort of Olmec style heads and megaliths and dolmens and things like that. And then that goes up through central Guatemala, through Palenque, which is a classic Mayan site, which has earlier megalithic construction at the base of it, which not many people realise. And then that goes up through the Olmec world, through La Venta, San Lorenzo, and it reaches the coast of Quetzalcoatlus, which means serpent sanctuary, which is where Quetzalcoatl, or the plumed serpent, arrived, and he left Mexico. So whatever you say about this line, whether it's a coincidence that all across here you get these plumed serpent legends, whether it's actually because there were people and they did travel through this part of the world, is open for debate and speculation. And I find this particularly fascinating because the stories are so similar. And what's also, you actually, along this alignment here, which is something Brian pointed out to me when we were in Peru, is that there is like Viracocha did like a pilgrimage across the land, and he taught all the arts of civilization and all the different techniques of food production and peace and harmony. And then he'd move on and go. He'd leave his helpers there, and they would continue working, and he would move on to the next place. It's very kind of, Christian, really. He looked a bit like, the classic Jesus as well, which is really odd, even though it's thousands of years earlier. And then he eventually left after about 20 years, after building Tiwanaku and all these other sites. And I believe he went up to Chavin and Sechan and other sites in Peru, and he left there as well. And this is like, you sort of see this trail of technology following this particular alignment or energy line. And then you pick up the trail. I haven't been to Costa Rica and Nicaragua yet, but I bet you get the same. I mean, this is according to David Hatcher Childress. He thinks it's the Olmecs, and I kind of believe this now, that the Olmec culture here and the Viracocha culture here were all connected. There was a genuine connection there, whether it was over thousands of years or whether it was just a group travelling up over a few years, we don't know. But the similarities are just getting quite remarkable. And again, you get the same thing here, where he arrived on the Raft of Serpents, taught all the arts of civilization, taught all this stuff. And he went after about 20 years and left from Quetzalcoatlus again. And when the Spanish arrived in Peru and in Mexico, a few years apart, both countries and both cultures in Central and South America thought it was the return of Viracocha and the return of Quetzalcoatl. That's why the Spanish were able to come in and just dominate the landscape there, because they genuinely thought it was the return of their pale-skinned god with beards, and they were tall, and they were kind of arrived on boats, like a raft of serpents, like Viracocha and Quetzalcoatl did. And so you really have to consider this, were they then, if they were just doing this area here, were they then going up here? Were they going to all this area, different parts of the world? And you've got this is Japan, this is the Osaka area, which we saw the megaliths earlier, the polygonal walls. You have the whole underwater Yonaguni situation here. Indonesia, Java. This is, there's been a ton of sites on some remote islands down there which look exactly like the Colombian carvings. This is something David Hatcher Childress actually doing a tour there with his World Explorers Club in June. He showed me a load of photos he managed to get. And again, it looks like the same culture as you get in Colombia and Chavin and Olmec. And this is the same current, same energy line here. And this is just the plume serpent energy line we're looking at. We're not even really exploring the rainbow serpent, which is this one, or the female great dragon, as Robert Kuhn called it. But there's a whole world of exploration out there, as we all know, and it's certainly worth getting out to see as many of these sites as possible. There's actually something coming up next week, which I find quite interesting. This is another representation of the plume serpent, rainbow serpent energy current. And on the 20th of May, I did take this information off the internet, so I'm assuming it's true. This is the path of the plume serpent energy current here. And here is the sort of path of the eclipse, which is supposed to be happening next week, which you can see Mount Fuji in Japan, Mount Shasta in California. Where's my bearings here? Yeah, so it goes through virtually the same alignment as this. If that's significant, I don't know. If anyone's got any ideas about that, please have a chat with me afterwards. I'd be very interested if there's any particular significance with that. But anyway, we're going to be going back to Peru. I'm going to be going back every year now because I love it there. And me and Brian Forrester are doing regular tours that he does. He lives there. He lives in Paracas. So if anyone would like to join us, you'd be more than welcome. So thank you very much for listening.